What is up, everybody? Happy Halloween, and welcome back to the movie Battleground. My name is Aaron Knoll, and we are here for the second year in a row bringing you guys a horror exhibition match in honor of Halloween. This year actually happening on Halloween, which is really exciting. And this year we decided to tackle it something different. Obviously, all of our exhibition matches so far have followed a very similar format. But rather than just kind of doing the same thing since we already did one last year, I thought let's try and be inventive. Let's come up with something different. And if there's one thing I'm great at, it's trying to come up with new inventive ways to play this game. If there's one thing I'm also great at, it's not coming up with ideas that succeed. But we still trial them anyway, so let's see how this works out. This is going to technically be an 8-man match, although those 8 men are not here tonight. Instead, I am joined by 4 judges. We have Mr. Austin Pez Howell, Mr. Jake Tato, Sean Sandberg, and Madi Raymond are all here with us. And the way that this is going to work tonight is the 8 competitors have recorded their segments for this match prior to competing within this match. And the match is very simple. They are answering one question, and that is, what is the best horror film of all time? Now, if you guys are regular watchers of Movie Battleground, you guys know this is a question that we have asked multiple times on the show. We've actually asked it in technically 5 matches, but one of those got canceled. So 4 different matches publicly that have been released. And so we have 8 competitors here tonight. Now, 6 of those competitors are returning from the match that they played in, debating the same answer that they gave at the time. 2 of our competitors, Joe Farrelly for scheduling purposes and Amaru Moses, due to publicly not being a horror fan, opted not to return for this match. So I've thrown in 2 wildcard options who are big horror fans themselves to see if they can kind of rock the boat and make their way into this exhibition match. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to start off by playing our competitors' opening minute segments. Each competitor was told prior to recording their segment that this is their one chance in 1 minute as solidly as possible to pitch why their film is the best horror film of all time. These 4 judges are going to be working behind the scenes, listening and judging the arguments. At the end, they're going to take some time off screen to rank the competitors. And at the end of all this, based on the way that these 4 have ranked both their 1 minute and their 2 minutes, the top 4 players in an aggregate score are going to move on to the next round. So with all that said, Austin, Jake, Madi, Sean, thank you guys for being here with us tonight. Are you guys ready to go?
Let's go.
All right. So let's go ahead and get into this. And we are going to start up first with one of our returning competitors talking about a horror classic for everyone except Stephen King. This is Noah McCausland defending The Shining.
Cinema is art, and art is very subjective, yet all the pieces that have been passed down over the centuries have the same thing in common. They show a master at work in the careful creating of the piece, and they inspire thought and conversation years and decades later. Good or bad can be argued all day, but the fact of the matter is the best pieces of art are the best because of their notoriety as much as their craftsmanship. A metaphysical and narrative maze, The Shining has been watched like so many films by Stanley Kubrick through ways of deliberation and reconsideration. Although initially reproached for its lack of conventional haunted house scares, the 1980 film has beckoned audiences, critics, and scholars back to the eerie void of the Overlook Hotel, as if anyone who sees the film is fated to repeat an ongoing cycle of examination and speculation. Kubrick refused to answer questions about his intended meaning, and in doing so, he preserved the great arcana about his work. Ever the mad genius, largely rejected the emotional care of King's backstory because he saw within the bones of The Shining an opportunity for a journey into the heart of visually and sonically inspired terror that few films have ever come close to replicating.
And time. All right, so that is our first opening from Noah McCausland for The Shining. I'm going to go ahead and give the judges just a moment to wrap up any thoughts they may need to take down on it. The first thing I want to do is, to a certain extent, apologize to the audience. If any of the audio is a little odd on here, a couple of these I did have to record in other locations or without my full equipment in order to make this happen. So I did do my best to kind of clean up what I can, but I'm also not a specialist in this stuff. So, there's a little bit of crackling there, or maybe an echo. Not a crazy one. I did watch these to make sure they weren't bad, but it's not perfect either. I'm doing my best. I don't get paid here. That said, if you guys are ready, we'll move on to the next one. All right. And we are now going to be moving on to collectively what is maybe the most interesting pick of this entire thing. He got shocked looks in his match, although he did end up, I believe, taking the point for this question in his match. Let's hear Will Cohen defend Identity.
Why is Identity the best horror film? It's extremely simple. It takes everything that was great about Hitchcock films, was great about Agatha Christie's books, and just tightens everything up into just about 100 minutes worth of just pure suspense and horror. It adds slasher elements, it adds supernatural elements, it adds psychological horror elements, and just puts it all into this just electrifying cast, electrifying movie. You just never know from 1 minute to the next of what's happening until the very end, when you're just gripping your head going, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. Oh, haven't I, I've read Agatha Christie before. Oh, I've seen Alfred Hitchcock before. Not like this. They put everything into the serial killer's head, and you get to watch one by one as personalities die off. You don't see that anywhere else in Hitchcock or Agatha Christie. This is where it's at.
And time. All right. So that was Will Cohen's 1 minute argument for Identity, as we'll go ahead and give everybody a chance to wrap it up. We're going to be moving next into our first wild card competitor. Now, as I said, I picked up 2 wild cards. This was just off of my own personal knowledge when I thought of who is a horror fan within the league. These are the first 2 people that I thought of, and this one is certainly a horror classic. We're going to move on to, listen, I thought of you to judge, didn't I? All right, man. Listen.
It's okay.
Listen, man. And all the winners here.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
We're going to move on to Alejandro Hernandez with A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street is easily the best horror movie of all time, if only because they had to be incredibly creative with this movie. It's very easy to do a slasher movie like Halloween or Friday the 13th, where you have a killer hunt down and kill everybody in the camp or on the street. But this movie needed to make you feel the desperation of being in a nightmare, being trapped in a dream, and they nailed it perfectly. Not only do they have to get creative with the concept, they also get incredibly creative with the kills. That scene of Freddy walking down the street with his arms extending, the scene of Tina getting stuck in the body bag and being dragged through the hallway, that entire thing is fantastic, and they did it on almost a shoestring budget. Freddy Krueger is the ultimate horror movie villain in that he is a monster who used to be a person, and now he's got the ability to trap people in their dreams, and that is incredibly impressive for a movie.
And time. All right, so there we have the third argument, Alejandro Hernandez arguing for A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, did I line these 2 up back to back because it's an ironic fact that he mentioned it? Yes. Did he know that this was one of the other films? No, he didn't know that this was going to be a film. That was just a genuine comment from him. But the next argument, if the judges are ready, I'll look for a quick indication there. All right, we look all good. Mehdi, you good?
Yep.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the 4th film, which is going to be Chad Webb defending the John Carpenter classic, whose franchise just recently ended for the 5th time, technically. This is Halloween.
A horror film is at its best when it creates tension and atmosphere to unsettle you and make its scares so much deeper, and when it gets to the core of what makes us all scared. John Carpenter's 1978 masterpiece Halloween came out at a time of Dahmer, Gacy, and Bundy. Since we still have to deal with monsters like this today, we are constantly reminded that the real monsters don't come from outer space, but rather they live in our own backyard. The concept of a faceless evil returning home after killing its sister to stalk and kill others with no motive is terrifying. It's one that turned this small independent film into a landmark success both financially and culturally, with a legacy that would change the genre of horror forever. It popularized the concepts of horror movies critiquing social values, as well as the final girl trope that gives us power to female characters to foil the villain with agency of their own. Laurie Strode is the perfect foil for the most iconic horror villain ever put to screen, the Shape, also known as Michael Myers. Halloween is the greatest horror film ever made.
All right, time. All right. So while our judges wrap up their notes, I'll put out the reminder for the audience that we are halfway through the first round of this little mini horror event. Again, Noah McCausland argued for The Shining, Will Cohen for Identity, Alejandro for Nightmare on Elm Street, and Chad Webb just argued for Halloween. We're going to take a step away from talking about, we've already had 3 classic horror films. We're going to take a step away and move into some modern horror. If our judges are ready, by the looks of it, they are. So we're going to move on to Kevin Poss arguing for A Quiet Place.
My choice for this is 2018's A Quiet Place. This is directed by John Krasinski, and it's his first foray into horror by directing. He's also in the movie. He stars in the movie alongside his real-life wife, Emily Blunt. And there are a few youth stars: Noah Jupe, Cade Woodward, Millicent Simmons, who is deaf in real life. She plays a deaf girl in Todd Haynes' Wonderstruck, and does a fantastic job in this film, also playing a deaf girl. And it's a necessity because the screenplay, which was co-written by Brian Wood, Scott Beck, and John Krasinski, it's a post-apocalyptic set in the very near future, and we pick up 89 days into an event that seems to have wiped out most of Earth's population. So I'll get into more of this in my 2 minutes.
All right, and time. All right, so that is number 5. We're going to stick with the modern horror film argument as we're going to move on to our 6th competitor, Alec Miller, who will be arguing for Hereditary.
Hereditary is the greatest horror movie of all time because of the superior directing from Ari Aster. How good he is at setting tone in the movie, and as well as the performances. The performances from Toni Collette and the other actors in this movie are absolutely elevate this movie to a whole different level than what you would normally get. And what good horror movie doesn't need a really nice twist? And I think this movie has one of the best horror movie twists to happen, especially the fact that it happens right in the middle of the movie. It kind of subverts everything that you saw in the movie. So Hereditary, having all this work in its favor, and also in introducing the whole aspect of elevated horror. I think that this movie is able to take the idea of elevated horror and include it with its own scares and its own creepiness to help the movie make it one of the greatest horror movies of all time.
And time. All right, so that was argument number 6. Again, to recap the films while our judges finish up there, we have had The Shining, Identity, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, A Quiet Place, and Hereditary. And if you guys are ready, by the looks of it, we seem good. We're going to go ahead and move on to number 7, our penultimate argument, which is going to come from our second wildcard competitor, Mr. John Marr, who will be arguing for a bit of an outside choice. He is going to be arguing for the film Let the Right One In.
In 2004, John Ajvi Lindqvist wrote a phenomenal book in Sweden called Let the Right One In. It was made into a movie in 2008 by Thomas Alfredson, also called Let the Right One In. It got the great treatment so many great foreign films make, is that an American remade it 2 years later. Matt Reeves made Let Me In. And actually just recently on Showtime, now they've turned it into a series. So it is a very influential movie. It's daunting because we're talking, we go all the way back to the history of vampires in cinema. We have Nosferatu, Dracula, The Lost Boys, so many great movies about vampires. It is really, in 2008, it's a stale topic. So for Thomas Alfredson to come in and make it beautiful again, to make a layered movie that tackles so many topics, all while centered around the lore of vampires, 2 stellar performances by 2 child actors carrying this thing. There's LGBTQ themes, there's themes of bullying, isolation, the struggles a child goes through with divorce, alcoholism, all against a beautiful setting, a beautiful backdrop, beautiful score, and great performances.
And time.
All right, so that was John Marr for Let the Right One In. We are through 7 of these now. We're going to go ahead and move on to our final film, which is going to be Jacob West arguing for Jaws. And if the judges are ready, you guys all look good, we'll go ahead and get into our final 1-minute segment.
Aaron, I don't know why I'm here. You know I don't do horror. In fact, you let me pick Jaws as my answer for the best horror movie of all time in an actually sanctioned match. Guess what? I just looked it up. According to IMDb, Jaws is an adventure thriller, not even a horror movie. Way to screw the pooch on that one. So you know what? Screw you. Screw your little game. My answer is The Thing. The Thing, directed by John Carpenter. That is the best horror movie of all time. Does a great job of blending horror and sci-fi. The visual effects, like this thing came out in what year? 1982. It's supposed to look bad, but no. When you see the couple times you see that creature, it's terrifying. It looks crazy. The guy defibrillates it. The chest opens up and eats his hands. That is insane. And then the great thing, you don't know who is the creature or who is a human. You don't know who's dangerous. That's scary.
I can't lie. It hurt a little bit when he said screw me. But he sacrificed time for a good argument for that. So we're going to take it for what it is. But with that said, though, guys, we're going to go ahead and take just a quick second here, allow the judges to put their thoughts together from all 8 of these, and we'll be back in just a moment. All right, so we had a brief moment there. The judges have kind of put their thoughts together. So as I said before, the way this is going to work is the final ranking is going to be tabulated based on a score of how they ranked the competitors. Now, there's going to be 2 lists from each judge. They're going to rank them based on their 1-minute opening. And again, this is with the thought in their head of who sold them on why their film is the best horror film of all time, and the 2 minutes being an expansion, a continuation, just the supporting details and how well they sell those. And so with that said, we're going to go to each judge. We're going to start up top first with Austin, and I want you to give me who was your number 1 and in a brief summation why they hit the number 1 for you.
Yeah, my number 1 for the opens was Chad with Halloween. He just crammed about as many points of contention as you could into a 60-second period, which I know he's known for, and kind of writing it out, laying it out, but literally hitting all the points about the tension, atmosphere, legacy, social views, final girls, killers in your own backyard, relation to the to serial killers around that time. Everything just worked. It was very succinct, very to the point, and very related to the question. So that was my number 1.
All right, Medid, down to you. Who came first for you?
I also had Chad for almost exactly the same reasons that Austin was just talking about. I've talked a lot this last little bit about like making sure that you have preparation ready for these debates, and it was very obvious that Chad had a script that he wanted to follow, and he went through it in the 60 seconds. But yeah, he got the most out, and definitely was able to argue a lot about why Halloween is the best horror movie of all time.
All right. Jake, up to you, sir. Who was your number 1?
I will echo the sentiments of my fellow judges in saying Chad was the best here. Unsettling, or like the real monster thing. He hit it's financially successful, culturally successful, and the final girl thing, as mentioned by Pez, was a really strong argument for me.
All right, and then Sean, down to you.
I actually was totally different than the rest of the judges. I went with Will on this one, just because I really liked how he talked about the different variant approaches that Identity had, and the fact that it kind of winds up doing something unlike the majority of other horror films, and that it's very much like Agatha Christie and Hitchcock, but just tightened up. I liked all those elements to his argument, but Chadwick was my number 2 for that. So we're all pretty well in agreement. Chad did an amazing job on that.
All right. So then we're going to go around. Now, again, keep in mind watching at home, who they're going to bring up with this segment is not necessarily who they ranked last. It's just the competitor who they think could improve or what they could improve on going into the 2-minute segment. This is just for us to put some more judges' thoughts out there because the judges are awfully the most, usually the most stunted part of the videos per the runtime. But since this is a bit of a shorter experiment tonight, they have a chance to actually speak some more. So, Mehdi, I'm going to go to you first. Who do you think could improve going into their 2 minutes?
So I'm gonna go with Will. I didn't hear enough about why his movie was the best. I just heard, and kind of echo what Sean was saying. He talked about how it's different from Hitchcock and different from Agatha Christie, and a little bit more tightened up. But I didn't hear enough about what that means and like what makes it better than any of the work that they've put out. Because these guys, the two people he listed, are two of the greatest of all time, and he didn't give me anything that made it better than them. He just said, "Oh, it's a little bit tighter." So I wanted to hear more, but I know that in 2 minutes he's going to be able to explain a lot. Will's a great debater as is, so I'm expecting him to do very well in the second round.
All right, Tato, up to you.
I'll throw some love Papa's way. He could improve a bit, but he had that disadvantage of his first 30 seconds being a delightful joke. But he did throw out that the creature is terrifying. There's some badass kills in there, and I'm curious to see where he goes.
All right, Sean, down to you.
I think Kevin probably a place where he could definitely use some work is instead of giving a plot description, give us reasons why the film is the very best. That was my main note on that. Additionally, with Noah, I loved his argument. It felt like something written by Pauline Kael, as opposed to like an actual like opening statement to a debate. But other than that, it was terrific.
All right, and then Austin, last one before we move on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing on Noah's expansion about The Shining because, again, like kind of like Sean was saying, it was a nice intro about talking maybe about like the art of Stanley Kubrick, the science behind a mad genius, things like that. But I just didn't hear a lot about the actual question, like what's the best horror movie? Like there was like almost no talk of the actual movie being a horror film or some of the horror elements. I'm sure he will expand on that. So I think there's a lot of potential there for him to shoot kind of near the top if he really hammers in on the question in the 2 minutes.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your guys' thoughts. Again, with the judges, it's usually a thing of more runtime than it is any sort of thing against the judges, but it's always great to have moments where we can hear people kind of speak their minds a little more and go into these things. But with that said, we're going to move into the second part of the debate if you guys are ready. Now, again, I have already taken the scores behind the scenes from these guys. I know where the competitors stand, but this 2 minutes is a totally different thing. This is the competitors' chance to put as much out there as they can to support why their film is the best horror film of all time, building on that 1 minute that they gave. This is a chance for those at the top to stay there, a chance for those near the bottom to improve. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and loop it back around to the recently mentioned Noah McCausland. This is 2 minutes on The Shining.
Film was also a masterclass in filmmaking and adds to the rewatchability. Every time you watch it, you pick up on new aspects every time, like the importance the sound plays. Few films have used sound as unnerving as The Shining does. The score has a sinister relationship with movement. It highlights and places importance on not only Jack's movements, but the growing invisible corrupt influence of the hotel. The music suggests the Torrances, Jack and Wendy, along with Danny, will be judged by forces of ghostly, mythical, and historical importance. Kubrick expertly uses dramatic irony by using the camera to give knowledge to the audience that what the characters don't know. This perfectly creates tension and makes the audience question when it's going to happen and is he going to hurt anybody. You see the isolation that Jack puts himself in. He stopped spending time with the two of them, no doubt making him go crazier faster. The cinematography helps to show this isolation even more by almost never having Jack and Wendy in the same frame. And if they are, one is always in the foreground like they're an afterthought. It's usually Wendy who's an afterthought. Having the camera on a steady cam and low to the ground helps create a feeling that something is always watching, that there's some supernatural force. In The Shining, you firsthand witness the descent into madness and the horror of a man wanting to kill his family. It's iconic for its imagery with the blood elevators and the twins, only to mention two. Jack overlooking the maze, cutting to Wendy and Danny, not only demonstrates the cold gaze that Jack has, seeing them as toys to be played with, but also suggests that there's a similar gaze overlooking Jack himself. These technical aspects only serve as evidence for its rewatchability. There's always something to pick out. There are so many fan theories because this film is mesmerizing and so open-ended that it lends itself to its conversation. You have so many amazing shots and so much imagery and great work of sound that it helps for this rewatchability.
And time. All right, so that is it for Noah tonight on The Shining. I'll give the judges a moment to take down their final thoughts as we go ahead and prepare to move into, and I will say this, the most variated ranked player, again, without giving things away necessarily, in our 1 minute openings, there was a pattern that began to develop, but the player who was the most variated in terms of his ranking, going from number one, obviously, as Sean said, to near the bottom for other players, was Will Cohen with Identity. Can he build on that and cement himself in the final four? Here is Will Cohen, if you guys are ready.
Yep.
All right.
Identity as a horror film throws out the entire rule book in terms of what a horror film is supposed to be. It has all of the the classic tropes. It has the somewhat abandoned hotel. It has rain. It has thunder and lightning. It's just very atmospheric. And then they add in slasher elements slowly. They add in great suspense. But then as soon as you think you have any idea what's going on, that rule book just goes right into the wood chipper, and you are just left with an exhilaration and just one exhilarating thrill ride from minute to minute. And not only that, you have just a great cast. You have John Cusack, you have John C. McGinty, you have Alfred, you have Alfred Molina, you have all these just wonderful actors, both from the classic and some up and newcomers in there, and they're just acting off of each other like verbal chess partners. And then what happens? Again, you're left with this big reveal. Oh, all these people it turns out they're all personalities in one serial killer's mind. And lo and behold, they're just getting picked off one by one to see who the dominant personality is. And even then, you think that the movie is over. You think that, oh, this is just bright, nice, and sunshine. You see Amanda Pete going down to Florida and harvesting oranges, and then all of a sudden the next big reveal comes up that she wasn't the dominant personality. The dominant personality is there to murder that last personality, and then you get to see the aftermath of it, which is just breathtaking. This is easily the best horror film for that reason.
And time. All right, so that is Will Cohen finishing up for Identity. We'll give the judges a moment to take down any final notes that they need to, as we'll go ahead and move on to our third competitor in this lineup, Alejandro Hernandez, bringing it back for A Nightmare on Elm Street, as soon as you guys are ready. All right.
Wes Craven has a lot of really good horror movies. The Last House on the Left, The Serpent and the Rainbow, Scream, of course, being probably his most popular. But Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, is his magnum opus. Like, this is the film that Wes Craven brings everything he could possibly have to the table. He wrote and directed the movie and was heavily involved in the production with the design of the rotating room, which is one of my favorite things of all time. And they get a lot of mileage out of it, not only with Killing Tina, but also the Volcano of Blood that Glenn gets to do. Introducing Johnny Depp as an actor. This was his first movie. And Tina, back to Tina for just a second, she was such an interesting character because the movie leads you to believe that this is going to be your main character before Nancy is even introduced. But after she's killed off, we move on to the next quote-unquote victim, the golden ticket, if you will, for Freddy Krueger. And Robert Englund does an absolutely amazing job bringing this character to life. But on top of that, he had an amazing character design with the sweater, with the hat, with the burn, with the claw. Man, that stuff is iconic, and I love everything about it. Heather Langenkamp as Nancy brings sort of a realism to the character. Like, she's not just a final girl. She's not just somebody that is stuck waiting to be killed. She's proactive. She gets really intensely focused on bringing Freddy into the real world and ending his reign of terror completely. Now, obviously, end of the movie, you can't exactly say that that happened. And of course, with the late great John Saxon being in the movie, he had such an incredible performance across the board. The movie only cost about $1.8 million, and they made that back in the first weekend at $1.27 million. But either way, they grossed $25 million worldwide, and this movie has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is the highest I've ever seen for any horror movie, and that. For a multitude of other reasons, is why I think Nightmare on Elm Street is the best.
And time. All right, so that is the end of the argument for A Nightmare on Elm Street. We'll go ahead and let the judges finish up their points as we go ahead and move on to, as was made very clear in the first round, the judge's favorite, Chad Webb. It's a good thing these are already pre-recorded because now he doesn't know that he has pressure to live up to technically. But we'll go ahead if you guys are ready, and we'll move on to Chad's 2 minute for Halloween.
That's 95 accurate?
What happened?
So he said 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's accurate, right?
I didn't check any of this, if I'm being real. I can, if you want me to. I can look it up.
No, I was just going to, like, if we were fact-checking, then that would be...
No, most of this was recorded within a 10-minute window, so I didn't fact-check them.
Accurate. I just looked it up.
Yeah,
it's accurate.
Okay.
Thank you.
It doesn't change anything. I just wanted to make sure. That's
No, you're good. You're good. All good. I had like 10 minutes to record each of these, so I really wasn't checking.
All good, man. No worries.
Hey, man, it's an exhibition. This is all pride, no stakes. With that said, we're moving on to Chad Webb.
The opening sequence is enough to hook you in as you experience the death of Judith Myers from the eyes of a killer, her little brother Michael. The 7-minute tracking shot sets the tone and still has not been topped. The Shape is a fantastic character study to behold, as he has no personality, just a propensity to kill, and he hides his humanity under a blank white mask. The writing in this film is flawless, and you can pick up on new things each time you watch. The dialogue furthers the plot and develops our characters. No screen time is wasted. It's a perfect 90 minutes. The tension and atmosphere was built using carefully crafted techniques on a small budget using lighting, shot composition, blocking, and cheaply made props to give the film that feel of visceral realism. This is the horror film that people return to every year because it defines a holiday both with its name and its terror, boasting the best and most chilling horror score. It's a score you can listen to without watching the movie as well, and you'll get that eerie feeling like you're being watched. The performance of Jamie Lee Curtis sells this fear too. You can feel the dread that something isn't right in Haddonfield. Loomis, played brilliantly by Donald Pleasance, really sells you on the threat and the determination to stop it, which he does briefly. The ending is so profound too, because after you see that the Shape has disappeared and you see the empty locations of heavy breathing, the movie seems to be saying that the evil is everywhere and around every corner, so watch out. What more can a horror film do or say to get under your skin and stay with you long after you've seen it? Halloween's legacy and impact on the horror genre is unmatched. Creators of Scream and Friday the 13th cite Halloween as a massive influence. It's the scariest film based on its pure relatability and visceral realism. Not a shot is wasted. People adore this film, so much so that they keep trying to remake it over and over to try and recreate its magic and appeal. But no one has been successful since John Carpenter scared everyone in 1978. It's been scaring folks for decades since. It's pure horror, and it's the greatest horror film ever made.
All right. Leaving seconds on the table. That's a confident man right there. We'll see how that pays off for the competitors. As we'll go ahead and give them a second before we move into the back half of our competitors. And we are going to go to Alec Miller, who is, oh wait, no, I had that ordered wrong. Kevin Poss was up first. I apologize. Kevin Poss for A Quiet Place when you guys are ready. All right.
Quiet Place. As I said, it is directed by John Krasinski. He's in the film. So their world is occupied now by alien creatures who are drawn to sound. So the world building is very effective. Every scare is earned. I love how they input the the sound. They bring sound as that is what the horror is here. Every little sound that is made. Marco Beltrami is the composer. He's a super great asset in this film. Adds a lot of flavor to the film without overloading in it. But yeah, it's great seeing this family, see how they maneuver through daily life, without being able to communicate. And it shows the core family, which is not so. It's something we've kind of gotten away from in America. So I think that's kind of what the focus was. But showing them living in a household, playing board games, they play Monopoly, but they have to use like soft pieces. They can't use anything that'll make noise. So yeah, it's very intriguing to see how they do this, how they go through the story. But yeah, A Quiet Place. It was obviously good enough to garner the sequel, which I'm not going to bring up, but it did garner a sequel, and it's highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know how much the judges care about that, but it was 100% at one point. I know it is currently. It's currently 96% on the tomato meter. So for a horror movie, that's really good.
And time. And to answer your question, I was prepared for that one. That is also factually accurate. All right, as we give them a chance to wrap up their thoughts, we'll go ahead and move on in just a moment to Alec Miller arguing for Hereditary. Whenever you guys are ready, we all good? All right, here is Hereditary.
So as I said before, Hereditary is the greatest horror movie of all time because it combines the directing of Ari Aster with the performances that you get from all the actors in the movie, as well as something I didn't mention, the cinematography. The shots in this film are absolutely stunning. The cinematographer was Paul Pogosevsky. I probably messed up his name, but the way he framed shots and the different things that he did with the camera, it absolutely made this movie. It just completely pulled you into the film, as well as the music. That's another thing I wanted to mention. The music as well. The score was done by by Colin Stetson, and I think this is one of those movies where it doesn't get as much love for the score because it's so subtle. It's all about it's all about creating mood. It's all about creating the tension that is in the movie, and he does a fantastic job. And like I mentioned before, the performances you get in this movie are amazing. You have Toni Collette, who in my opinion, was absolutely snubbed for an Oscar nom for her role as Annie in this film. And one that doesn't get mentioned often enough is Alex Wolff. The way he plays this certain scene that the scene where after Charlie has died, it's well acted, and he doesn't have to say a word. It's all in the face, it's all in the eyes, and he does a stunning job. And then you have also Millie Shapiro, who has a short but very memorable role in this film. Like I said, the acting is top notch in this film, and then you have the direction with Ari Aster. I think he creates tone like nobody else, and his dives into grief and into real life emotions and feelings. I think he does an amazing job at that as well. It's something that even without the horror, the movie would absolutely work, but the horror just takes it up to another notch, and that is why Hereditary is the greatest horror movie of all time.
And time. All right, so that is our sixth competitor, Alec Miller, finishing up for Hereditary. We're going to be moving on to our seventh and penultimate argument for this match as we begin to wrap up the argumentative side of this exhibition with John Marr for Let the Right One In as soon as our judges are ready. Good to go. All right, here is for John Marr.
I think the difference between a lot of horror movies and movies like Let the Right One In is, you can have slashers, you can have paranormal horror movies, you can have supernatural horror movies, you can have things like The Exorcist that deal with like singular themes. But it's very difficult to take the horror medium and make art. And what Thomas Alfredson did with this movie is he made art. there's so many contrasting things, the dark of night versus the white of the snow, innocence versus being corrupted, the cycle of how a vampire takes on a familiar. When we first see the character of Oscar, played beautifully by Cara Hedebrand, he is bullied. He is horribly bullied. He is isolated. His parents are divorced. He has absolutely nobody. He's descended into basically this like Travis Bickle-esque state where he's fantasizing about murdering his bullies, but he's so frail and small that he never has the courage to stand up to them. And then all of a sudden, this new person, this new girl who he thinks moves in, and, it's slowly revealed to him that this girl is a vampire and she does not want to be friends with him for reasons, obviously vampires are pretty closed people, but they hang out, they get together, and then she opens up to him and they form a friendship. However, later on in the movie, it turns out that she is not she is actually a castrated, hundreds of years old young boy vampire who is trapped at the age of 12. So we have those themes in the movie. We have themes of the secondary plot where there are alcoholic people in the surrounding community. A man is killed and it turns out he's best friends with another man. We see that man descend into alcoholism. We see Oscar's father descend into alcoholism. We get to see all these stark, like, a lot of movies can't tackle this many themes and go into them as deeply as Let the Right One In does. And we still get great choreography with the kills. We get great effects. We get to explore the vampire lore. There's a very powerful scene about what happens when you do not invite a vampire in to your house. And Ellie comes into the house and she's bleeding from her eyes just to show how dedicated she is to having this friendship with Oscar. It's beautiful.
And time. All right, so that was John Marr for Let the Right One In. And with that said, once the judges are gone, we'll go ahead and move on to Jacob West in the rear, arguing for, of his own volition, The Thing. I don't care, man. It's his argument to try and win. So let's see if he can pull it off. That said, you guys ready to go?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's right. I'm changing my answer. It doesn't matter. You have to allow it because it's in my contract somewhere. 1982's John Carpenter directed The Thing. Again, like I just said, the little bit of time you see the monster, because you don't see him that much, which is why it's a far superior movie than the new 2011 Mary Elizabeth Winstead one. But the little bit you do, like, it makes your skin crawl. It is terrifying to look at. It is a much better monster movie than Jaws is. Another reason why it's better than Jaws, which is why I am not answering Jaws. John Carpenter does a fantastic job directing this. He has become one of the biggest horror directors out there, of course, with doing Halloween, becoming kind of known for that. And then you have an amazing cast. Of course, you have Kurt Russell as MacReady, the main person you're following throughout, but then just that short cast, that little bit of cast, the supporting characters, as you will. That's what it's called. Keith David, Wilford Brimley, T.K. Carter, David Clennon, and the list goes on. All do a phenomenal job. The little details that go into this movie. When you first meet the monster, it's a dog. It's running towards the Americans, and you see Norwegians come by and start shooting at it. And the Norwegians are yelling in Norwegian, or whatever that language is that they speak in. And they're saying, "Don't touch the dog. The dog's a creature, or the dog's a monster." That little detail is just pure cinematic genius, just like the rest of this. And also the movie, hey, it's a monster. You kill the monster. Yay, we're done. Wait, that happens in Jaws. Another reason why it's not that good. Whereas in The Thing, you don't know. It's MacReady and Childs are both right there. You don't know if either of them are the monster, if one of them's human, or if they're both human. You don't know. It's terrifying.
All right, and that is the final 2-minute argument. I want to say first off, before we get into the final part of this, thank you to all the competitors: Noah McCausland, Will Cohen, Alejandro Hernandez, Chad Webb, Kevin Ploss, Alec Miller, John Marr, and Jacob West for competing. Again, very different thing. Different for you guys judging, but different for them competing. You're basically talking the same language. so it's a little bit of a different experience in terms of trying to write that argument. But thank you guys for being the guinea pigs on how to try and make this work. Also, Jacob, I did fact check you there. It is Norwegian. That is what the language is called. So you were correct there. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and take another just quick short intermission. You guys will hear some elevator music, and we will be back with some thoughts on those. All right, guys, so we are back. Once again, we've had the discussion behind the scenes. I know where each judge ranks their competitors, and we're going to have just some quick thoughts from the judges before we go ahead and come up with the final tabulation and end this match with who will go through to the final four. Now, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and put something out there, and this is the ultimate you can be proud of yourself moment. Instead of talking about our first place, we're going to talk about who they ranked second, because Chad took first place for each and every competitor. So Chad Webb, congratulations. You don't even have to finish the video if you don't want to. You are going on to the final match. You took first place. As was said, you took first place for every single ranking with the exception of Sean in that first round where you came second. So that is the most impressive performance we had by far. Congratulations, sir. With that said, though, we're going to talk about who came second for each competitor. And Jake, I'm going to start with you this time. Who is your second place?
In second place, I had John. He really convinced me that the movie was art, and that I'm kind of curious to go see this one, even though I'm not much of a horror guy, with this bullied kid who becomes a Bickle-esque character and like this weird vampire relationship and the alcoholism and stuff like that. So yeah. Got me curious, and it sounds really good.
All right, Sean, down to you.
I went with Noah, and I think more than anything else, it was just an assault of detail in that 2-minute section, and I think just because of that, and the fact that it never really strayed into him just telling me who starred in the film or like about a set piece or something like that. Don't get me wrong, anytime he did talk about a set piece, it always harkened back to what made the film good, and that's something that really like spoke to me about his argument. Now, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Yeah, Noah did a fantastic job, and once again, it sounded like something written by Pauline Kael, as opposed to anything I've heard in terms of an argument presented within this sort of format.
All right, Austin, up to you.
Well, in this 2-minute expansion, what I was really looking for is, again, I'm a stickler for the question, and the question says, what is the greatest horror film of all time? So I was looking for not only why is it a great film, but the all-time thing. Give me a reason why it's an all-timer. Give me legacy. Give me rewatchability. Noah did that for me, and that's why he came in second, just under Chad, because not only did he lay out a lot of technical aspects, a lot of the scenes that work, a lot of the craftsmanship, but also, like I said, the rewatchability, why people go back and study it over and over again, the fan theories, all the documentaries that have been made about it. And that, to me, adds to that all-time part of the question, not just why it's a great movie.
All right, and then Mehdi, down to you.
So just a little bit behind the scenes, the way I judge things, I do a little bit of a point system, and from second place to fifth place was all separated by about 1.5 points, and two of those guys have already been mentioned. So I'm going to go with the third option of Alejandro, who just barely snuck out on second for me. I really enjoyed the way that he was telling me about Nightmare on Elm Street and comparing it as well to other works by Wes Craven, and obviously highlighting Robert Englund's work as well. The creativity aspect of it as well, I thought was a really interesting task that he had to undertake. So a lot of the things he was saying I was really enjoying. Even though I didn't enjoy the movie that much, he convinced me that maybe I like it a little bit more than I actually do. So props to you, Alejandro, for a great second round.
All right, and so we're going to go on to the final thoughts from judges. So what we're going to do for this is I'm going to ask the judges who of the competitors, because the first round I asked them who do they think could kind of step it up and improve. So we're going to flip it this time around. who do we think maybe kind of disappointed a little bit, didn't follow up on that second one the way that you thought they could have? So with that said, and also any final thoughts you may have about the format or how they did or whatever you want to throw in. So with that said, Sean, I'll go to you first with that question.
I guess in terms of the format, being concise is key on this, because since, we really do only have like the 2 minutes and the 1 minute to go off of, you don't have your 4 minute argumentation round. I'd just say to anybody that's going to do something like this, just be as concise as possible. And I think that's where Chadwick probably won for just about everybody, because it wasn't just concise, it was so descriptive, and it was so, it just hit absolutely every single point. I think for me, Alejandro kind of let me down a little bit, because I really loved his opening pitch, but then I kind of felt like he got bogged down in just who was in the film and performances and stuff like that. And I didn't really hear enough about the plot of the film to what made it one of the greatest of all time. There was elements of his argument where he was talking about, the rotating room, which is a really cool feature of it, and it got reused, but there just wasn't enough for me to really go off of when it came to the really, really strong arguments presented by the other competitors as to what made their film so great. So yeah, I'd probably lean towards Alejandro on who let me down a little bit based off of how good they were in that opening minute.
All right, Austin, up to you.
For me, the one I was slightly disappointed in was John Mars Let the Right One In. And again, it's what I talked about a second ago with why Chad and Noah stuck out to me. I felt like John hit a lot of the points about art and the themes and the things like that, and hit almost nothing about why it's an all-timer. Why it's the greatest film of all time. There's nothing about legacy. There was nothing about rewatchability. There's nothing about why it stands above all those other vampire things, even though it plays with the lore. And to me, that was an important part of where I went, is again keying in on the question: why is it the greatest horror film above every other horror film literally ever made? And I didn't hear almost anything about that. While it was a strong argument, if you were doing a back and forth, and maybe he would have hit on it if there was like a closing argument. But I was really looking at the second half of that question. And that's what I was looking for, and I felt like I was disappointed by John that he didn't really hit on any of that.
All right, Mehdi, down to you.
I got to go with Alec for the second round. For me, a lot of the points that he was making were almost repetitive of what his first round was, and I did really enjoy his first round, but it just felt like he was kind of hitting the same points and not bringing anything new to the table. He did say a couple things, like he did mention the cinematography and an understated score, but I still just wanted a little bit more about what this movie was and how it hurt you. I mean, if he had mentioned the scene of where the kid is in the corner and you don't notice it right away until, the light kind of comes in a little bit more, that would have put him over the edge a little bit for me, but I just didn't hear enough that was new compared to what he had brought in the first minute there.
All right, and then Tato, up to you.
I'm gonna go with Kevin here, because for me, he just said facts about the movie in his 1 minute, and I was like, okay, that's fine, lay it down. But then come out in your next two with more about why. Tell me why this is the best movie, and he didn't. He came out and again said John Krasinski directed it. John Krasinski was in it. He just hit the same facts. The only thing he put out to me that that illustrated why Quiet Place was great is that it had a high Rotten Tomatoes score, and that's not enough, personally.
Not to just interject real quick. There was also the use of sound that he talked about. I did find that was a pretty decent.
He did have a little bit more on the sound of that one, but
all right, I did have that as a note. Gotcha.
All right. Well, guys, I want to thank all of you for participating in this. Again, this is an experiment on everyone's behalf, for the competitors and for the judges. This is a totally different way of going about a Battleground match that we're trying out. This feels a little more successful than our previous attempts at experimenting with the format. But I want to thank each of you guys, first off, for just bringing really good constructive criticism. I hope anyone of the competitors who watches this can take that and use it towards something. Because again, this is why I understand more and more as the show goes on why people love the multi-judge format a little bit more, because there is a varying set of opinions here. Some people thought someone was near the top, others thought they had something to improve on, and so I think it creates a really great varied effect here. So I want to say again, thank you to Austin, Jake, Madi, and Sean for being here. We're going to go ahead and do one more quick cut, as I'm going to go ahead and tabulate the final scores, and I will reveal to you in order from 8 through 1 who ranked and who is going through to this match. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, guys, we are back from that final break. I want to say first off, thank you again to my great judges who are here tonight: Sean Sandberg, Madi Raymond, Austin Howell, and Jake Reese, excuse me. Thank you guys again for being here. But let's go ahead. So we did the math. Now, as I said, this is basically done by golf score. Now, I'm not going to reveal how many points each person earned because I'm not here to put anybody on blast. I'm not here to necessarily prop anybody up. Everybody knows we made it very clear that Chad did come in first, but we will go ahead and get into the ordering of this list. And unfortunately, coming in 8th and final place was Kevin the Philosopher Poss, arguing for A Quiet Place. Unfortunately, his argument, Kevin went about this, and he, to put it out there, he did say when we recorded the actual segment that it was very different for him. It was very odd to not have anyone to bounce off of in terms of debate, and even in terms of how you're structuring your argument to kind of bounce your movie comparison-wise to theirs. And I think that did unfortunately come across a little bit to our judges. And it just didn't quite sell the way that it might have in a normal match, where Kevin has used the same sort of formula to his arguments, and it has picked him up some wins. Tonight, it didn't quite translate. 7th place is going to be Papa West. Again, this was a situation where we went for the bit. Papa asked to switch up his answer. I said I was cool with it. We went for a funny bit. I hope it made you laugh, but unfortunately, it didn't pan out for him in terms of argument. He comes in 7th. In 6th place, we are going to have Sinister Alec Miller. Again, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for him with Hereditary. The more modern horror films, I noticed we were having a bit of an issue with, selling the all-time part of it. I think that seemed to be maybe the biggest criticism people had of his. Behind the scenes was just really focusing on the all-time part. A great film, and he sold that part well. It was kind of the second part of it. So we're going to go ahead and move on to 5th place, or technically 4th place, because I threw in 2 wildcard competitors to make this interesting, and boy, howdy, fuck, did they make this interesting. Alejandro Hernandez and Calamity John Marr, both on a scale of a maximum of 64 points, scored 31 points each. And trust me, we sat here, I'm not kidding, there's 30 minutes of footage that was edited out in that last section. We sat here for nearly 30 minutes trying to come up with ways to tie break these two. We went by who was ranked higher, and it was between the 8 different lists that our competitors put together, and it was legitimately 4-4. 4 of the lists had Alejandro higher, 4 of them had John higher. Then we sat here and tried to come up with a different way that we could tie break it, and we went with differential in terms of spacing, how far apart they were from each other. And I'm not kidding when I say beat for beat throughout this entire match, they were equidistant from each other, with obviously the flip-flop of who was on top depending on who was judging them. These two came in, they had the least amount of prep of any of the competitors, so I have to give them credit for that because they didn't argue this question in an actual match, but they made my life hell. Now, right now, I'm thinking of maybe just putting them both in there. Maybe we'll do some sort of separate tiebreaker. That'll be a prologue at the start of the next video. I don't really know, but I do know that they tied at 4th, and I have some decisions to make. Congratulations to both of you guys. So well done there. Moving on, in 3rd place, jokingly, he's talked about the fact that this movie is not one that people will go to, but he sold it. The virtuoso Will Cohen will be moving on to our match, arguing for Identity. Coming in number 2 with his I said it behind the scenes, it was edited out of the video. I was worried for him as how it would do in an argument, but I thought the way that he structured it and spoke it, it was like a great think piece. If I read this article online, I would think it's a brilliant article. I was scared about how it would do as an argument, but Noah McCausland sold his argument for The Shining, coming in 2nd place. But at least in this stage right here, with no rebuttals, in terms of just selling your movie, definitively, here's how definitive it is. Noah McCausland, out of a maximum of 64 points, again, going by golf rules, so you want less points, had 25 points. He was second place with 25 points. Chad was first with 9 points total. He came first on 7 of the 8 lists that were ranked by our judges tonight, and he came second on the one that he didn't rank first on. That is an impressive showing. Chad is going to be the heavy favorite going into this upcoming match, and I look forward to seeing it. So for sure, we know Chad, Noah, and Will be taking each other on. Maybe there will be a tiebreaker between the fourth places. Maybe they'll both be there. I don't know. But you guys can find out next week. Tune back in Monday, November 7th, and tune in to check out part 2 of this matchup. However, for tonight, we're going to let everybody go home early. This has been a shorter Movie Battleground video, but certainly I hope one that was entertaining to you guys. Thank you again to all the incredible competitors, Kevin, Jacob, Alec, Alejandro, John, Will, Noah, and Chad. Thank you to my judges, Austin, Jake, Sean, and Madee. Rate the video, comment below, tell me what you think of this format. Is this something you guys want to see more of for these bigger, never-ending questions that just have so many answers you could try and validly, that's the word I'm looking for, validly argue for? What are your guys' thoughts? Check out the Facebook page for updates on Movie Battleground. Always, I post there, TMG Entertainment or TMG Trivia. Subscribe to the channel. And on behalf of myself and all my producers here at the Movie Battleground, we will see you guys next time. Take care.